Hello. So I thought I'd take a few minutes and just kind of summarize last night's workshop around cold email because I think it's a useful exercise to go through and to be thinking about. And so we'll just kind of walk through it in a few minutes, and then we'll be covering it more in an upcoming episode. And in fact, next week we have an assignment is to come back with another revised version of your cold email. So we'll kind of get into that. So just the uses really quickly. There are probably other uses, but basically the way I think of it in terms of cold email is it's either to do one of two things. It's either to set up an initial sales call, which is what I typically use it for, and that is it's a message or a series of messages to get an appointment, or um, it's used as an ongoing awareness program to someone who hasn't been invited, who hasn't opted in, but is willing to listen because your emails are of enough value that they decide not to opt out. And I guess one of the considerations you want to keep in mind here is you want to make sure that they're not spammy for GDPR reasons. And so if you can structure the emails that they have enough value to them, even though they've not opted in, that they're basically getting an uninvited email. As long as you're adding enough value that they don't opt out, then you can keep sending these cold emails to them, and with probably little downside. Of course, the thing to keep in mind is right out of the gate is that if they do opt out, you better opt out. Stop sending emails. All right. So with that in mind, and one of the things to keep in mind was that when it comes to GDPR and such is if it's of legitimate interest, that is something to focus on. If you can, if it is of legitimate interest, that's one way to satisfy the GDPR requirement. So um, in terms of what to cover in the email, this is kind of a nice extension to what we talked about a week ago, which is around the elevator pitch. And much of this is the same. And in fact, Andy Black pointed out that this is really copywriting. And so um, the email body, think in terms of the email body, is not much different from an elevator pitch or any copywriting you're doing. And that is, it needs to be brief and crisp. It should be formatted well, so it's easy to read, easy to digest. It should be about them. What's the value that they get out of this with a reader? It needs to be compelling, ideally, and conversational. And you want to include, wherever possible, social proof, data, specific, compelling evidence that you can point to make it your email credible and of interest. Um, and then from there, perhaps as important is the setting up the subject line. And so, one example of this, if I bounce back one slide, where am I? Here is the subject line should be short. As I mentioned in the call last night, I read in something in the 40 character range. That way, it shows up on a phone as well as online, as well as on a PC. You want to avoid spammy words wherever possible. You want to make it, if possible, time sensitive to get opening. Again, it should be compelling in some way. Make it about them. And if there's a way to remind them that there's a connection between you've been referred by someone, or you have some common interests, or whatever the connection might be, to increase the likelihood that they'll open it, because that is your goal, is to get them to actually read the copy inside the letter. For me, it's setting up a call. That's the goal, is setting up a call. So to set up a call, can you, in the subject line, ask a specific question that's compelling, share a specific data point that they might find valuable, and then intrigue them enough to open it up. Again, are you referred by someone? So there's a connection. If that's in the subject line, that's great. Providing specific value in the subject line, if you can do that in a short number of characters. And then, as I mentioned, 15 minutes to discuss. If you can this works actually more often than I would have thought. That just saying, "Hey, can I get 15 minutes to talk to you about X?" And if you can, if the X is compelling, then they may very well find time to do that. I tend to use that in the body of the email. That's the call to action. And so I think one of the things, the big takeaway from the session, to go back to this idea of what should be in the body, and that is, again, it should be brief. It should be very simple and easy to read. And so the visually making it visually easy for someone to see it and want to read down through the rest of the copy in order to get to the call to action. And then finally on this topic is the call to action. And that is, you probably don't want to have more than one call to action in the email body. So ask yourself, what is it in them? What is in it for them? And then what is it, the one thing that you want them to do? Don't ask them to do more than one thing if possible. So if, one link to some place, you want to really get them to a landing page, or you want them to get to your Calendly link, or you want them to get to your home page, or you want them to download something, or whatever it is you want them to do. Ideally, it should be one thing. That's the call to action that you want to leave them with. So the rest of the conversation, we broke down various emails, and we'll certainly be going through this exercise again. But I just thought it might be useful to have a quick summary on how to think about cold email and how to leverage what you've been doing with your elevator pitch to make that process a little more effective. And by all means, ping me with questions if you have them.